Great, thank you, Jenny. Thank you, Laura. Okay, so what I'm going to do now, it's a bit strange because I can't actually hear what Naomi's saying, but I'm going to introduce Naomi now, who's going to talk to us about her work using an interactive sound light device called iMuse with students with profound and multiple learning difficulties. Naomi's presentation is going to be about 20 minutes, and we will have time for questions after that, and you can type your questions in the box that you can see where you're typing your questions already, so you found that. And I'd just like to thank Naomi for doing this webinar today and hand over to her. Off you go, Naomi. Thank you.
Hello everybody, I'm Naomi Parish and first of all I'm just going to tell you a little bit about myself, and then I'm going to talk about iMuse, which is an intervention that we've been using recently at the specialist college that I work at. I'm going to talk a little bit about the literature around it, a study I did looking at the effectiveness of iMuse, and then also have some time for questions at the end. My presentation should last about 20 minutes. So first of all, I work at Henshaws College in Harrogate, and I'm a programme leader for the learners at this college with PMLD and SLD. So primarily I'd say I'm a teacher. I spend 2 days a week teaching. I teach the students IT, so we do things like switch skills and touch screens, iPads. And then I also look at their programs, so I design their timetables, think about setting their targets, go to their EHCP reviews, and also manage the other teachers on the program. Is there anything else? Oh, and recently I did a Masters in Education at Birmingham University into severe, profound and multiple learning difficulties, and it was a part of that Masters that I did my research into iMuse. So the study that I did as part of my master's was called The Engagement of Adults with Learning Difficulties in an Interactive Environment, a case study. And that interactive environment was iMuse, which I'm going to tell you a little bit about. So iMuse is an interactive environment, and it's got different elements: a vibrating mattress, motion sensors, visuals, and switch access. So all those elements go together to make a really immersive experience. So the vibrating mattress, as you can see in this picture, this is a student laid on it. He's actually laid on it on top of an achiever bed, so you can move the mattress so the students can access it, so they can lie on it on the floor, or they can lie on it on an achiever bed, or if they want to, they can have it wrapped around their wheelchair, or they can sit on it on an adapted chair. The mattress has vibroacoustic vibrations going through it. These are like waves of vibrations that are really relaxing. So then the second element of iMuse is the motion sensors. So these motion sensors are set up with a connect center for the Xbox, and you can make any part of the room reactive to movement, and it will make music. So you could move your hand a tiny bit and it will make music, or you can make it that someone shakes their head and it makes music, or they move their foot and it makes music. So you can really tailor it to that person and the size of where they are in the room. And then iMuse also uses a visual element, so you can see in the photograph on the slide it's being projected on the ceiling, and these visuals are chosen by the student, so they can choose the shapes they want and also the pictures, and they can do that with switch access if they're able, so they can press a switch and change the colour or the shape to what they like, or they can tell you what they want with their communication methods, so the symbols or a communication aid, or just from their facial expressions by you trying different visuals. The visuals in iMuse change with sound as well, so when you're really quiet there'll be very few visuals and it will be very still, and then as you move or make noise the visuals become more animated, so that people using iMuse can really explore their voices and have that more feeling of self. And we also sometimes use a microphone in iMuse where you can put different effects on again to help the students explore their voice. Users of iMuse then say that it provides a relaxing and creative space where participants can connect with the world around them, make their own choices, and develop non-verbal ways of communicating. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about how iMuse started, the history of iMuse. So it started off with a musical instrument called the theremin that you might have heard of in the 1920s. That was the first gesture-based instrument, and that went on to inspire the sound beam that you see in a lot of specialist provision, which is a gesture-based technology where students move their hand through the beam, and that makes different music. So it makes music accessible for people with physical difficulties. And then that went on to inspire something called sound therapy, which was developed by a man called Philip Ellis, and that's where he added vibration along with a sound beam, so combining those two elements together. And then eventually he went on in 2004 to develop iMuse, combining the vibration, so sound movement, so sound beam, but more through the sound sensor, so it's better than sound beam because you can have it anywhere in the room, not just breaking through a beam, and then also the visual element as well. I've got a video to show you now, just so you can really see what iMuse is all about. The sound may not be working so well, but on the YouTube video you'll be able to hear it, but I'll just tell you what's in the video. So the first part of the video, it's got 5 students in it. The first part of the video has got a student using arm movements to make music, so using the motion sensor to make music. And then you've got a student using their electric wheelchair to go up and down in the room and go through the motion sensor to make music. Then we've got a student using a drum and exploring the visual element of iMuse. And then lastly, we've got 2 students again using arm movements to make music. So I'll just play that video for you. So you can see in those different videos that students are really using it in different ways, and iMuse is all about the student tailoring the session to how they want to have it and how they'll enjoy it. It's about making choices and having your own session. So now I'm just going to discuss some of the literature that I looked at around using these interactive environments with people with profound and multiple learning difficulties. So first of all, I looked at why music was important for people with PMLD. I can see a photograph here of one of the students that I work with really enjoying using a drum. So first of all, music can really help students with engagement. It's something it can really draw them into a session. Also, it provides students with a shared experience, so they can share music with maybe their family or their friends or other professionals. Everyone can enjoy music at different levels, so it provides that shared experience for them. It's also really important for anticipation skills, so waiting in the pause in the music and then coming back in at the right time, and those anticipation skills are really an important part of early communication. It's really motivating for quite a lot of people that really enjoy music, and it will get them involved in communicating with people and coming out of their shell. And then finally, it also provides a sense of agency, or it can do. So if you're doing music in the right way and making music yourself, you're more aware of yourself. You're not just passively taking part in things. You can really take part in the music. Then I also looked at the literature around music technology. So Alan said that technology can maximize the learner's control over the environment. As I'd say, so students with physical difficulties and profound and multiple learning difficulties can sometimes find it difficult to engage in music, and a music session for them might be them having to sit back passively and listen to music. But with technology, you can really support them to join in and be more independent. I've got a photograph here of one of my students, Rosie, using a Switch and an iPad, and you can see how much she's enjoying being in control herself. So as I said, you can use switches and you can use touch screens, or you could use things like the sound beam or different gesture controls to give students that sense of control and sense of agency over the music. I also looked at a recent study by Kosovaki and Curran, who looked at some students with autism and severe learning difficulties using something that's been created recently called Cosmo units, which is a set of 6 switches that provide sounds and music and visual cues, so similar to iMuse. And they found that broadly engagement increased for these children when they were using the Cosmo units. And then I looked at the literature specifically about interactive environments. So I looked at 2 different interactive environments, and then also at iMuse. So I looked at the Mediate project, which is an adaptive environment that generates visual, oral, and tactile stimuli to allow people to express themselves. So it's quite a complex system, is how it describes itself, and it adapts itself to set up a dialogue with the user. It was trialled all over the world, and it was successful with those who trialled it, although they mostly trialled it with people with mild learning difficulties, and they found that it might be too complex for people with PMLD. And then another project that I looked at was called the Enlighten project, and this was developed specifically for people with PMLD by Cobb et al. In 2007, and they used torches combined with computer software to create visuals along with music. They found it was a useful learning tool, but there were lots of technical difficulties with it, which is a really important thing to consider with these type of technologies, because if the technology isn't going to work, then the student isn't going to enjoy it, and they're not going to get the learning out of it, because they're just going to be sat waiting for things to react to them, and they're not doing. And then finally, I looked at the studies that have been done into iMuse, which have been done by the man who I mentioned earlier called Philip Ellis, who created iMuse. He did some studies into working with the elderly and also into children with profound and multiple learning difficulties. He found in his elderly participants that the improvement was seen in their mood. And he found with children with profound and multiple learning difficulties that their movements went from involuntary to voluntary, so they were making more purposeful movements and more intentional movements. So having looked at the literature, I put together some research questions that are the things that I'd like to look into in my study into iMuse. So first of all, I wanted to see if a weekly trial of iMuse would increase the engagement of a group of students with PMLD or SLD over 5 weeks. So we were lucky to be given a trial of the iMuse technology at our college. So it was a perfect opportunity, but the trial was only 5 weeks, so that's why it was over 5 weeks, and we wanted to see if the iMuse technology did improve engagement of the students over that time. Then we also wanted to see if the iMuse trial increased the engagement of the students not only while they were in the iMuse session, but 2 hours after the intervention, as some of the research that I read beforehand suggested that might be the case. And then lastly, I wanted to see what the staff working with those students felt about the iMuse intervention and whether they found it was useful or not. So what I did, I used 4 participants. There were 4 students with PMLD or SLD, and they were aged 20 to 23. And each participant, as I said, took part in a 5-week trial of iMuse. So what we did was we did a simple observation of their engagement when they arrived at college. Then we observed them in their iMuse session using Carpenter's engagement scale. Then we asked the staff at the end of the session, we gave them a questionnaire to see what they thought of the session. And then we did a simple observation again of the students 2 hours after the iMuse session in the classroom. So just to let you know, so when we were observing them in the iMuse session, we used Carpenter's engagement scale. This is just an example of it here. It's interesting because this engagement scale is potentially going to be used to replace P levels in schools. So it might not affect us in specialist colleges, but when our students come through with P levels instead in the future, they might have come through with assessment using this engagement scale instead. So this engagement scale works by using 7 different indicators of engagement, and you score them from 0 to 4, and then you add up all the scores. So the different indicators of engagement are responsiveness, curiosity, investigation, discovery, anticipation, initiation, and persistence. So I scored the students with against all of these areas in the iMuse session, and then added up the total score. So these are the results. This is what I found. So as you can see, the engagement scores did gradually increase across the 5-week trial from week 1 to week 5. And I've discussed why that might be. So as I said, it could be that just the adding of music to the student's day by having an iMuse session may have increased their engagement, as there's a strong link between music and engagement. It could have been that the visual element really helped to increase their engagement. As Ellis had found in his study, that adding the final element of the visuals when he put the iMuse together did have an increase of engagement compared to just using the music, for example, just using Soundbeam. It could be the sensory element of iMuse. The vibrating mattress does stimulate the proprioceptive system, and some sensory integration can be shown to increase engagement. Finally, it could be the intensive interaction element of the iMuse session. iMuse is a one-to-one session and really gives you an opportunity for intensive interaction without distraction of other things around you. So it could be the adding of that intensive interaction for the student each week was why their engagement increased. There was some individual variation between the students, and that I had only used 4 students. As you can see, 3 of the students' engagement did increase across the trial, but the last student, student D, their engagement actually decreased. This was due to health reasons. They had bad seizure activity towards the end of the trial. And I think later on I'll discuss that shows really that I need to get better data. I'd need to use more students and do a trial over a longer period of time. Then I also looked at the data in the different, as I said earlier, there are different indicators of engagement. So I looked at the data in more detail about these different indicators of engagement. This is on this slide. This is just a photograph of one of my members of staff and a student doing intensive interaction. So as you can see, the engagement indicator that had the highest score was to do with responsiveness, and second was curiosity. That could be because iMuse, it really responds to the students. So if they move, they get the music or the visuals change. So it's really showing that they can get responses by doing things quickly. And again, that curiosity of exploring the different elements, because there's so many different choices in there. And I suggested that possibly persistence was the lowest area because it was such a short trial. So the students didn't have time to really persist and keep going with those skills. So then I looked at my second research question, which did the iMuse trial increase engagement of students in the classroom 2 hours after the intervention? The engagement of students was observed to be slightly higher after the intervention than beforehand. So as you can see, each week it was slightly higher than afterwards than it was beforehand, suggesting that there might be something in it, that the effects of the iMuse session lasted for longer in the day. However, there was again some individual variation. And as I mentioned, it could be the sensory integration element. As you're getting that sensory integration from the mattress, that can last for a lot longer than just while you're getting it. So it could be that was lasting longer into the day. I also had to consider that the reason the engagement the students had increased later on in the day might not have been to do with iMuse. It could have been to do with something else that was happening in their day. And then finally, I looked at my last research question, which is what the staff thought of the intervention. So as you can see, these are some of the comments the staff made. Student C made larger movements than I've ever seen before. Students seemed really relaxed and calm throughout the session and made lots of good, unprompted choices. Students would often get caught in a trance and stare at the screen for large periods of time. Student D listened to the facilitator and others talking in the room. And student C made choices of colours and sounds. So the interesting thing about staff comments is that despite being given the opportunity to leave negative comments, all staff comments regarding the iMuse intervention were positive. And I categorised the staff comments into the indicators of engagement as I'd done in the observation, and again responsiveness came up as the most common indicator of engagement mentioned. They also categorised their comments into different themes, and the themes that came up were choice making. As I've said, iMuse really gives you that opportunity for the students to really tailor their own session and make choices about how they want to be positioned physically, what sort of sounds they want, what visuals they're interested in. Increased physical movement. So what you can do is make the part of the room that's sensitive to sound a little bit further than that student would usually move. So they move their hand a little bit further or their foot a little bit further. As I said, an exploration of colours, that's the visual element, and also relaxation and calmness from the mattress. So as I alluded to earlier, there are some limitations to my study in that it was only a small sample and also a short length of time. And also that I didn't look at the different specific and individual elements of iMuse on their own. I looked at it all together. So it could be that the part of the intervention that was having the biggest effect was the mattress, but I wouldn't know that because I looked at all the elements together rather than looking specifically at the mattress and then the visual element and then the sound. So I recommended that I extend the sample. So not only to have more students, but to maybe look at a more varied sample. So to see if it would be of benefit to perhaps the students with autism or students with anxiety issues, or maybe with milder learning difficulties, as well as looking at a bigger group of students. Looking at extending the trial over a longer period of time, and then exploring the benefits of iMuse beyond engagement. So looking if iMuse has an effect on other factors other than engagement, so perhaps target achievement, or maybe it reduces anxiety levels. As I said, isolating the individual elements of iMuse, so looking at the visual element, the music and the vibrations. And then finally, I recommended that we add iMuse to our curriculum at college, which we did do in September 2019. So we've been doing it for a fair few months now, and we found it really useful. So we've got about 15 students having a weekly session, and they seem to be really enjoying it. These are just my references. If you are interested in any of the studies that I've talked about, my email will be up in a second, and you can send me an email. I'll send you my references. So does anybody have any questions? That's my email address. Thank you very much for listening. Oh, and if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's my Twitter handle.
Thank you very much, Naomi. It's Yola here. I managed to hear all of your presentation.
Oh, good.
Thank you. I'll just give Jenny and Laura a bit of time to type in any questions they have. While you're doing that, I had a couple myself. Do you have to be quite sort of technical savvy to use this piece of kit?
To set it up, you need some training. But once it's set up, it is reasonably easy to use. It just involves a laptop, so using software on a laptop that's reasonably easy to use, and the projector. So really, we're really quite lucky at college because we've managed to have a dedicated room for iMuse, so the equipment is always set up. Some other people that use it, they have to put it away and plug it back in every time, and then that can be there's several wires involved, so it's getting the right wires in the right holes and that sort of thing. But I'd say with training it is reasonably easy to use.
Okay. And what about the cost? How much does it cost?
So it's quite reasonable compared to other equipment. We paid £2,500 for our equipment, and basically it doesn't come as one big package. You have to get all the individual elements together. So because it involves like a Connect from Xbox. You can buy those quite cheaply secondhand. You need a laptop, which obviously you can get depending on what type of money you've got, and the software. The main expense is the mattress. That's over £1,000.
Right. So that's the most
Yeah.
expensive part of the kit. Yeah, Jenny just asked about how much it costs. So hopefully we've answered your question, Jenny. And where did you buy it from? Did you have a particular supplier who gave you the 5-week trial, or?
Yeah, so we worked with, there's a charity called Accessible Arts and Media in Yorkshire, and they came and gave us the trial, which we only paid £500 for, and with that they came in and did training with us, and then they bought all the equipment for us, like sourced all the equipment for us, and we paid them. So that was really useful, and I think it's not something you can't just go out and buy it from a seller of sensory equipment on the internet sort of thing. You have to get all the elements individually. So working with somebody like Accessible Arts and Media has been really helpful. And I think they've worked with quite a lot of other provision as well. Most people that have got iMuse have got it through them.
And are they a local Yorkshire-based organisation?
Yeah, they're based in York, but they've definitely been working with other people. They worked with the Hollybank Trust in South Yorkshire, and I think they're working with some people in Massam in East Yorkshire at the moment. I think they've got iMuse at Percy Headley in the northeast as well, but I don't know of anywhere in the south that's got it.
But it would be a good place to start to ask them.
It would
wouldn't
be, yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I've had a question from Jenny who says, will you be sharing the presentation so we can feed back to colleagues? And Jenny, what will happen is after a couple of days, this presentation, the recording of it, will be available on the NatSpec YouTube channel, where you can watch it, or where you can send the link through to your colleagues if that's how you want to share it with them. Are there any more questions that anyone has for Naomi? Jenny, thanks, Jenny. Can I just check with you, Naomi? You said that the sessions were one-to-one.
Yeah.
And so presumably you only ever have one student in there with one member of staff. You can't have sort of several students, because of the sound and various things.
Yeah, because it's about that person being in control of the room. If someone else was, then it's about them and them controlling the room. So obviously if there's someone else in there, then they wouldn't be. So it's about them tailoring the room just for themselves.
Great. And you also mentioned that you've embedded it in the curriculum. So is this now 1.5 terms that's been running?
Yes, yeah. We found it really good.
Right. And have you been able to have any chance to have any external evaluation of that?
We haven't had any external people in. We did have the principal come in and do an observation. So he's been in and seen it, and he seemed to like it. So that was good. I think it is a really good way in terms of if you're thinking about somebody like Ofsted or someone who's looking at targets being achieved and stuff. It's a really good space to achieve those targets that these type of students might have. So their communication skills and as well as their physical things as well, which are really important.
And how long does a typical session last with a student?
So we timetable about 40 minutes, but it's usually about half an hour, but it can be shorter because it's about being their session. If they're tired or they choose to leave earlier, that's fine, or they can tailor their session as they want. But we make it a bit longer than we want the session to be, because you need a bit of change over time. Obviously with using the mattress, you need to change sheets over and things and change the way the room's set up to suit that person.
Thank you. And presumably you choose which aspects of iMuse you use dependent on the individual's skills and impairments.
Yeah.
So for instance,
right.
if a student has very little sight,
yeah, you might not use the visual element.
Yeah.
Although especially we found with our students with PMLD, we usually try everything, because you don't know, because especially with things like vision, it's very difficult for external people to assess things like that, and so we try them. We usually, when you start an iMuse session, like the first ever iMuse session, probably the first few weeks, you'd give them the opportunity to experience everything, because it's really difficult to make a choice if you don't know what's available to you.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. Okay, any further questions before I bring the webinar to a close? Just while you're thinking, if you've got any further questions, I wanted to say that the next webinar in this series will be on March the 18th, and it will be about using yoga within occupational therapy for young people with autism. And that's going to be given by Emily Kellett, who works at Seashell Trust as a OT at the Seashell Trust. And I just want to finish today and say thank you very much to Naomi for giving this really interesting presentation, and to remind you that it will be available on the YouTube, the NatSpec YouTube website. So unless anyone's got any further questions, it doesn't look as though they have. If you think of something after the end of the webinar, you can see that Naomi's provided you with her Twitter handle and also her email address. So thank you very much, everybody, and I'm going to end the webinar now. Thank you, Naomi.
Thank you.